The critical one here, obviously in the near term, is soybeans because of the traditional shipping seasons. Welcome to the Comstock channel. I'm Senior Analyst Brian Grete. The corn and soybean harvest is underway and we're just kind of creeping into it at the moment, but the heaviest activity is just around the corner. And so I want to take a look at the storage situation here in the United States for the grain and some of the logistics and all the other factors that'll come into play as we move through the harvest season. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk here recently about the storage and whether or not we'll have enough. The bottom line is, sure, there is enough storage in the United States. There's actually excess grain storage to hold the crops that we have coming on board. The issue is that we still have some old crop left, both in on-farm storage and in commercial storage. And as a result, we will see some squeezes in some areas. So we've already been hearing reports in some locations where commercials, elevators aren't taking delivery of old crop supplies through the end of the 24-25 marketing year on August 31st, but then maybe even restricting the new crop arrivals at some locations. And so this is something that needs to be tracked as we move forward. Well, what's the surest sign that we have storage issues? It's typically basis. So I want to take a look at where corn and soybean basis stands. Here's a look at the national corn basis that DTN tracks. And as you can see, those darkest reddish areas are the areas that have the widest basis at the moment. Where do you see them? You see them up in the northern plains, the western corn belt, but even off into the eastern corn belt somewhat. So we have, wide basis pretty much across the major production areas here in the central corn belt and upper Midwest as we head into harvest. And probably not too much of a surprise, the weakest areas are in the western side. That could be because of excess old crop that was carried into the new crop marketing year, but more likely it's a case of these are where the production is going to be the highest relative to what they have storage space for. And so what have we seen? Everybody's widened out their basis, whether it's commercials or whatever. The crush plants, ethanol plants, they have limited ability to store. The commercials have the ability to store the crop, but they're widening out. So they're telling basically the farmer, I don't want supplies. Well, the issue with that is that some farmers are going to face a crunch on their farm with on-farm storage if they're still carrying over last year's crop in the bin. The situation's much the same on the soybean side of things, obviously with the northern plains and down through the central plains being the weakest. But then as you move through Iowa and other areas of the central corn belt, you also see some much weaker basis levels than normal. And so this is something that isn't going away. The basis issue is going to be with us, I think, through the harvest season this year because of those factors. Storage is squeezed in some areas. We have excess supply, and we'll talk about the demand later on, but we're slow on the demand side of things, especially for soybeans. This is a look from USDA's national basis that they track, and it's just corn and soybeans here combined. And as you can see, this goes all the way back to last August. And the corn basis is weaker than average and weaker than it was a year ago. But really, the soybean basis, if you look how it's dropped off over the past couple months here, just extremely weak right now. And that ties into storage issues, but more so the lack of demand that we're seeing, and specifically from China. And you'll see that here in a little bit when I put a chart up with the Gulf exports and inspections. Actually, the inspections pace that we've seen hasn't been too bad and running above what the average pace is, the 3-year average. And this is from USDA's grain transportation report. And you can see that we've been running above a year ago. And really, in the next slide, I'll show you this, but the corn has really been carrying the weight here. Soybeans need to pick up the pace, and we're into that heavy soybean export inspection period. Usually the soybeans go off first. The prime shipping season, as we've mentioned before, is September through that January into February timeframe for soybeans. Corn typically doesn't pick up the pace until after the main soybean shipping season's done. Now, that doesn't mean that we aren't exporting corn. We're definitely exporting corn during that period, but it's typically soybeans number one, corn number two, and we haven't seen that right now. We've actually seen corn number one as these commercials and exporters get rid of the old crop supply and make room for a new crop, but the soybeans have really been lagging here recently. And you can see that on this chart, that now we need to start picking up the pace on the soybean side of things, and this is reflective of the fact that corn is definitely carrying the weight at the moment. If you look at the loadings at the Gulf, hasn't been bad, to be honest with you. Aside from 1 week back in early to mid-August, we've been running above the 3-year average there, the 4-year average for loadings, and doing the next 10 days, you can see there. Now, this was as of September 4th, so the 10-day period would be through the 14th, and then USDA will update this chart from there on. But, the loading space hasn't been too bad. We've been clearing out some of that old crop supply that's been in storage, and like I said, that's, commercial shipping down the river a little bit, and then the exporters clearing out so they have some room for the new crop supply. If you look at the corn exporters and where things are going, well, Mexico has done a lot here, but also, Colombia, Korea, Japan, major corn buyers. China shows up on here, but China isn't a major buyer. They weren't last year. They have nothing on the books right now, very similar to last year in that realm. And we aren't expecting China to be a big importer. We don't expect corn inspections to be cleared to China anytime soon. And so while they show up on USDA's list here, Mexico's the key one. A lot of that is railed into the country. But on the export side, the inspections at the Gulf side of things, Korea, Japan, Colombia, those types of markets are key. Soybean side, here's where China comes into play. And a glaring there on that top line is that they have no bookings on the books as we start the 2025-26 marketing year. And that's a concern because China is the number one customer. And this is the prime shipping season starting right now. And so we need to get China back into the marketplace. There have been some others, obviously, that made up for the slack, but China's the big one. And China being down 8% is a lot more than some of the other countries being off by single digits. That 8% for China is a big number when it comes to the year-over-year change and the change from what the normal levels would be. The one factor that's kind of the wild card here is the low water levels on the Mississippi. Now, this is something that we've dealt with the past several years, and so it isn't something new. There are reduced tows. There are reduced barge hours and number of barges that can move up and down the Mississippi because of the low water levels. But we aren't into a dire situation yet. You will see here, this is the Mississippi River at St. Louis, and I think that that's the key. Upriver from there, we're still in okay shape. From St. Louis, at that point, you start to get a little bit low. And then as you move into Memphis, you'll see that we're projected to hang over the next 10 days or so just above what is considered the low water mark. And if we get down to that, then that's when the tow restrictions really kick in and the hours of operation kick in and the level of loadings onto barges kick in, and it really restricts the grain movement. And so this is something to keep an eye on. Now, the forecast isn't friendly on this front. It doesn't show much rainfall across that lower Mississippi River region for the next week to 10 days and maybe even longer. And in addition to that, we're expected to see above normal temperatures. So the evaporation rates will go up, and it looks like a situation where the river levels are only going to increase. So as we move into harvest, the bulk of harvest here, we have storage concerns, one, but two, we have enough storage capacity. It's just a matter of some areas regionalized. We're going to see a storage crunch. And on some farms, if you haven't moved enough of the old crop out yet and you're still sitting on some of those bushels, you're going to be into a storage crunch situation. And so that will lead to wider basis. I think that wide basis is going to continue as we move through the harvest season for both corn and for soybeans. And the critical one here, obviously, in the near term is soybeans because of the traditional shipping seasons. Now, we've talked about this in the past. There is a possibility that the exporters could flip-flop a little bit and go with more corn up front because we have more export demand on the corn side of things. As we start the 2025-26 marketing year, corn export bookings are record large. So we haven't seen it this way in the past. On the soybean side of things, the export bookings are the lowest that we've seen in 6 years. And the concern there is that we just don't have the soybean demand, and we may flip-flop our export seasons to some degree. If you liked today's content and enjoyed my presentation, please like and subscribe to our channel for the Comstock channel. I'm analyst Brian Grete. Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and/or options is substantial, and each investor and/or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.